Yeah, I just wanted to say I've appreciated you since I first heard you on Linda Moulton Howe, and I know what it's like to be so angry because I feel like the shots killed my husband, who died recently. And just want to say, don't let your anger get the better of you. You know, stay healthy, stay strong, do what you can to not let this eat you up. That's my message. Anyway, thanks a lot for all you do. Bye-bye.
Initiative. I'm a very, very deliberate and committed follower, and 100% all in on your message. You posted a 13-minute segment of yesterday's live stream that I watch every day. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily watch it live, but I watch every one of them start to finish. In fact, typically I fall asleep to them and have to watch them again the next day. So just hats off on the work that you're doing. No need and no, not even a request to call back. Someday I'll get the opportunity to meet you up in Pittsburgh.
I have no responsibility for the current pandemic.
And my question is about that 13-minute segment with Tony Bark. I think that's an incredibly powerful segment. However, you dropped a lot of names, which of course I know you're fine with that. But there's also the name calling, which me personally, I'm fine with that, being from Manhattan, New York myself. And I wanted to really just ask, and I'll ask it on your gigaohm.bio, so no need to even respond to this, but I just wanted to make sure that you were okay with us or with me posting that segment everywhere. The Tony Bark thing and the Brandy Vaughn thing just makes my skin crawl and frankly brings a tear to my eye on a daily basis. So again, thank you very much for your incredible work and unbelievable courage that you and Verily and by nature or by extension your entire family, because I have an idea what you got on the line here. So thanks again.
Of course, as I've been trying to say for 4 years now, there is no pandemic. There was no pandemic, and there will be no pandemic. And it's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And if it's clear, we shouldn't waste time talking about it.
The rules, protect yourself at all times. Follow my instructions. Keep it clean, touch gloves if you wish, and let's do it.
Sweaty palms.
This is so crazy. Like goosebumps. This is so crazy. I feel so nervous. Like, what in the world, man?
responsibility for the current pandemic.
Stop lying!
I have no responsibility for the current pandemic.
Stop lying!
Introduce Jonathan, who's going to talk about his latest kind of distillation of what the pandemic means to society, to biology, to science, and to democracy, and to the whole kind of idea of empiricism and integrity. And then each of us, this incredible preeminent panel that we have, each one of you is going to get a chance to comment on his thesis. I wanted to bring everybody together because I've read Jonathan's thoughts about this. He's one of the most thoughtful critics of the pandemic management from the beginning. He was one of the co-founders of Drastic, which was the organization of independent scientists all
There's
over
all
the
kinds
world.
of ways to gain the confidence
particularly
of
at the
somebody.
beginning of the
Flattery is
pandemic,
one of
did
them.
really wonderful work.
There's all kinds of ways to
in
gain the confidence of somebody,
understanding
and flattery is one of
science,
them.
in
There's all
unearthing
kinds of
scientific
ways to
studies
gain the
that made a
confidence
lot
of
of this
somebody,
stuff
and flattery is one of them.
comprehensible. And
There's all
he's
kinds of ways
also
to gain the
been
confidence of somebody, and
instrumental
flattery is one of them.
in uncovering
There's all
some
kinds of
the
ways to
involvement
gain the
of
confidence of
intelligence
somebody, and flattery is
agencies
one
and
of them.
others.
There's all
in
kinds
the
of ways
management of
to
the
gain the
pandemic,
confidence of
also
somebody, and
the
flattery is one of them.
long history of
There's all kinds of ways
what we
to
call
gain the
gain-of-function
confidence of
science.
somebody, and flattery is.
Secretary Kennedy and Marty and Jay are operating in a very complicated political landscape, and they just don't have the latitude to act unilaterally. Secretary Kennedy and Marty and Jay are operating in a very complicated political landscape.
But you can tell if someone's lying, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's really important not to be a liar.
I think truth is good for kids. We're so busy lying, we don't even recognize the truth no more in society. We want everybody to feel good. That's not the way life is.
Now, Dr. Gallo and Dr. Fauci talked a lot about isolation and purification. Can you tell me what the difference is between the two?
Isolation, what was it?
Isolation and purification.
Of the virus?
Yes.
Well, you isolate a virus by finding the virus which causes a disease. You purify a virus by making just by purifying it so you get a pure virus.
Okay.
I don't understand what the issue.
They interchanged the two, and I wasn't sure
I see.
If it was the same thing or if it was two totally different.
No, it depends on how they use it.
Okay. Can you explain the process of HIV isolation?
Well, didn't Dr. Gallo do that? I mean, he actually isolated it. So.
Yeah.
I mean, why should I do all of this? This is all textbook stuff you're asking me.
Actually, JJCouey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, JJCouey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, JJCouey.
I just wanted to say I've appreciated you since I first heard you on Linda Moulton Howe. And I know what it's like to be so angry because I feel like the shots killed my husband who died recently. And just want to say, don't let your anger get the better of you. You know, stay healthy, stay strong, do what you can to not let this eat you up. That's my message. Anyway, thanks a lot for all you do. Bye-bye.
Our newsmaker this hour, Dr. Marty Makary, the FDA commissioner, marking his first 100 days on the job. It's been a busy few months with many changes at the agency, from vaccines to staffing. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Joe.
Maybe you've been on a few times. I don't remember, but we all went through that period together, obviously, and there's a lot of a look back now at that period. And I was, you know, it's a hot button issue, and sometimes it's tough to talk about, and there's conspiracies and controversies. I think of Novak Djokovic. Right now, he's going to be in the finals, I think, at Wimbledon. And at the time, I wondered about his decision, the decision of tennis. What do we know now, Doctor, in your view, about what we should have done with COVID? Should healthy people have been not forced, but strongly coerced to take that? At the time, I thought it was a game changer.
Strongly coerced, he called it. That was pretty good. Should they have been forced? I mean, strongly coerced, as if that's better, slightly better than...
And a lifesaver.
Well, look, Joe, I had said during the time of the pandemic that if we have vaccine mandates for young, healthy individuals, we were going to see a rise of an anti-vaccine sentiment, and I think that's exactly what happened. We saw a tremendous loss in public trust. A study in JAMA found that 71% of people trusted their doctors and hospitals before the COVID pandemic, and that's down to 40%. That's a 31-point drop. And I think it was from...
So one of the things that I would suggest you pay attention to is this idea that these percentages mean something, that you can understand the illusion of consensus by hearing these percentages. That's the enchantment that's being cast here, that there is a percentage, you know, when it crosses over that you can't really argue with anymore. When it reaches, I don't know, I guess 80% or something like that. If he says... polls say that 80% of Americans believe that there's an alien in the White House, then at what point do you stop arguing with it? That's the illusion that they're doing here. But maybe with the example of an alien in the White House, it's a bit easier for you to see how that illusion of consensus could be created by him just saying that when they poll Americans, you know, the majority of Americans believe. But when you think about a public health emergency, or you think about the transgender rights issue, or abortion, or gay marriage, or any of these other things, that's actually where this weapon is most aptly deployed, I think, most, you know, successfully used against us, where for a very long time we've already been trained to accept that there is a consensus that could be reached, where then we'd have to reconsider what we think about certain things. That's what the evening news does for us. That's what Sunday morning programs do. And it's a very, very dangerous trap if you don't see it, like I didn't, and most of us don't see as we were watching TV as a kid, and as we've transitioned to using social media as adults, or, God forbid, growing up as a child with social media as the default.
Ignoring natural immunity. I think it was from vaccine mandates insisting that soldiers and firefighters and teachers be fired if they don't have the vaccine, even if they were young and healthy and had the infection already. They had circulating antibodies that could neutralize the virus, but they were antibodies the government did not recognize because it failed to recognize natural immunity. So we lost a lot of ground.
Wow, so that's a whole spectacular just bang, 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 bang of the... Sorry, Ruby. Ruby just came over and wanted a little scratch on her head. The idea that he hit all of those marks, you know, natural immunity is real. It's defined by antibodies, but certain antibodies weren't recognized by the government. And I don't know in what context to travel or to opt out or, you know, and it's just remarkable how succinctly, after 5 years of practicing with Vinay and Z-Dog and others and selling his book for 5 years, he's gotten really good at this. And I assure you it's because he was given a script relatively early and told, you know, practice this, work on this. We'll update it as we go. And hopefully everything will work out and we'll get you in the Trump administration.
In public trust, and we're trying to rebuild that now through radical transparency and being very honest and telling people the government is not your doctor. Talk to your doctor and get good advice from your doctor's wisdom and judgment.
There are some changes at the Vaccine Advisory Committee that a lot of hand-wringing and consternation about the new members. Is it anti-vax, Doctor, would you say? Or how would you describe your approach to preemptive disease management?
Well, look, I think over at CDC, a different agency, they do have a reconstituted ACIP committee with a diversity of views among people who do believe that vaccines save lives. The past committee had pushed for COVID boosters in young, healthy people. And of course, that is probably why we see such a backlash today. There was never great evidence for repeat boosters in young, healthy children. As a matter of fact, there was a myocarditis risk that was largely downplayed in young males. And I think if you look at the track record of that committee, there's a reason why 85% of healthcare workers did not get a COVID booster last fall. So we are taking an evidence-based approach.
It's a lot harder to get mad at Marty if I keep these floppy ears in my hands. Dang it, what is this free disk space crap? I'm really just shocked, right? I mean, this is just the standard fare for these people that have been scripted since 2020 or earlier, queued up, even told to try to be relevant, before the pandemic. Get your book out. At this point, I don't think anything is beyond the pale. We are talking about people who operate on different time horizons, and they're thinking on different time horizons. If Mark Kulak is right about nuclear fuel and nuclear waste, even about some of it and some categories of it, then we're in an entirely different trap than we ever imagined. Yes, social media is a terrible part of it, but the commitment that these people will have to the goal and the destination will be far greater than we might have imagined, if indeed this plan is on that time horizon, where they can point back to a couple generations ago and say that, this is a continuous thing. People are serious about this. If you join up, there's no getting out. And I think a lot of these people are there. I think that's, that sounds crazy. It sounds very conspiratorial, but it's really probably how the world works. And that only requires coordinated lying to all the people in the club, all the people who are auditioning to be part of the club. And there might be different layers of the club. Who gives a shit? I'm going to switch over to the thing again.
Dr. Vinay Prasad and I outlined it in the New England Journal of Medicine, and we're basically saying that there's got to be a risk stratified approach. That is high risk versus low risk. Does a healthy 12-year-old girl today need another 60 doses in her average lifespan?
It's remarkable how deep they go. That one lady before this had kind of a fat arm. This looks like a pretty relatively fit young lady with also a deep needle. It's impressive.
And that is a scientific unknown, and we'd like to see a clinical trial before approving the vaccine for that reason.
And so what is Marty saying is the debate here? The debate is whether we should give somebody a COVID shot every year or not, because it wasn't approved for that yet. I don't know how you test that. He just said 60 times in their life. Is he saying that somebody should get a COVID shot for the rest of their lives? Is the CDC recommending that? Is Marty saying that is a valid question to consider? I just think that this is all a false debate. It's very similar to what was being done with the WHO in the video yesterday with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about the international health regulations and that they give rights to countries during emergencies and they want to amend them and we're going to reject the amendments, yada, yada, yada. I mean, this is very similar. What's happening, I think, quite frankly, is that they've lost a lot of senior people at the FDA that were offered retirement. And now they have a very big problem. There's some people who probably stayed because they thought they could get ahead. There's probably some people who stayed because they probably thought they were too young to retire. There's probably, but there's not a functional FDA there, especially if now they're reorganizing all the basic processes of the whole organization. Hiring right now. This transition is false. This seamless transition to podcasting is false. Well, the seamless transition to podcasting is real, but the podcasting is not a reflection of a functional FDA. Instead, it's the curtain behind which probably things are being ripped apart, destroyed, burnt to the ground, whatever they called it. Now, Giant Dog, you have to sit a little bit farther back because that's right there. It's good. That's fine. I got to be able to move my stool without running over your... No, don't roll over anymore. No, just stay right there. Okay, here we go.
How does removing the recommendation, though, increase choice, increase the patient's ability to come to a decision with doctors, since so many insurance plans and programs depend on ACIP and CDC recommendations in order to provide the no-cost, low-cost vaccines? Isn't this removing choice effectively from patients?
Now, the promise of the Secretary Kennedy is to let people know that vaccines will be available.
So that's really what this is all about, right? That's why I titled my stream this, the promise of Secretary Kennedy. It's just driving me bananas that social media is mentally captivating us to believe, captured us to believe that Secretary Kennedy represents some kind of resistance, some kind of health freedom, some kind of, free choice kind of thing that's kind of in parallel to, free choice versus pro-life or I don't know, something like that. And it's a really malevolent show. And I think Americans should be very alarmed that underneath the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I used to work for, was paid for by as a consultant for a year before I was a staff scientist at CHD for half a year. And now I've spent the last year trying to tell the world that I think that Mary Holland and Brian Hooker and Polly Tommy and Andrew Wakefield and CHD are fraudulent. I'm trying to tell people that I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is probably just a victim of a very elaborate Truman Show. He's on a script. He was told to trust it. And behind him are people like Aaron Seary and Mary Holland and Brian Hooker and Meryl Nass and Robert Malone and Steve Bannon and probably Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and, Joe Rogan and all these other people. I don't know who's at all the barbecues. But we have a very big problem on our hands because I do believe this can be characterized as America being undermined. It could be characterized as America being infiltrated because many of these people are not even American citizens. They're not even the default good guy, dual passport Israeli Americans, which I guess everybody says they're all good guys. That's why they're the only dual citizens that are allowed to serve in government as a representative or a senator. But I'm confused as to why there is a used to be kind of clown on TV doctor, Dr. Oz, a former officer in the Turkish military or some shit. Like, why is he anywhere near the head of Medicaid and Medicare? Unless there was like a huge disaster in the pipeline of the population pyramid and it was going to bankrupt America. And so they needed somebody, a dishonest actor in there who could use it as part of the controlled demolition of America. Control it, if you will. Why would they put a guy from Egypt with a UK passport at the head of the FDA talking about reorganizing all the stuff to do with all the fancy new medicines with some put in place child from India? Also not a native born American who highlights that he went to high school in LaPorte, Indiana. Usually when you're not born in America, then you don't say it. And he indeed doesn't say it. He says he went to high school in LaPorte, Indiana. Which is not a very nice place. He should have better been from Michigan City, Indiana. Anyway, let me just get this going again.
If people want them, you will be able to get a vaccine if you want them. So that's a decision between you and your doctor, and each individual insurance company has their own policy. Look, some insurance companies don't pay for important cancer treatments that for patients that I saw as a cancer surgeon, and so that is another entire issue that's unrelated to the FDA.
Okay, so insurance. So the fact that private insurers, employer-sponsored insurance plans, Medicare Part D, Medicaid, the Vaccines for Children program, all of them link providing no-cost vaccines to CDC and ACIP recommendations. That removing the recommendations doesn't remove in some way the choice that patients can make, especially the vulnerable patients who may not be able to afford to pay.
That's right. It does not remove the choice. And our job at the FDA is, and this is a charge by Congress, is to look at applications that are submitted.
So is he almost like pretending he doesn't understand the question? She's saying that if they don't recommend it, then a lot of these other organizations, private organizations, won't pay for it. And he says, yeah, that's right. It doesn't take away their choice. But their choice would be if it was paid for. If it's not paid for many people, they can't make the choice. I understand these are legitimate questions. I just don't want people to be able to make the choice between, getting hit in the head with a baseball bat and not getting hit in the head with a baseball bat is a legitimate medical question, because it's not.
To us and determine what is safe and effective. And so that is what we are committed to. I think there was some lost trust in the FDA when there was a new policy that basically said for a young, healthy 15-year-old boy, we were going to rubber stamp a COVID vaccine without a clinical trial every year in perpetuity, and the kid must get it. And I think we're saying we're going to be less absolutist when there's no evidence. I think the most dangerous thing you can do in public health is to demand something of a young, healthy individual when the evidence is just not that supportive for a new virus that creates a new protein and a new vaccine that creates a new protein, where we haven't had a clinical trial in over 4 years. And those results in children were mixed back 4 years ago.
The basic tenets of MAH, of MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, it seems to be it's proactive health care versus reactive. You'd have to do that with children, I think, and I immediately think...
It's important to remember in the chat that Marty is a cancer surgeon. He cut tumors out. And Vinayak Prasad is also a cancer guy. He worked at the National Cancer Institutes where the in-laws of Li Minyan worked for so many years. This isn't a remarkable small little circle of shitheads.
About as a country, our levels of obesity are just much higher than they need to be or should be. What does tackling that entail, and how does it play in?
I think it entails getting cane sugar into all of our sugary drinks. I think it entails getting the petroleum-based dyes out of all of our chips, and make sure that any fats that are used at fast food restaurants are based on tallow. I think at that point, most of our problems will go away.
Into these new drugs, and whether you really start, I don't know, is that what we need to do to all our kids with Wegovy or Ozempic or something, doctor? Or what's the answer? Is it foods? Is it additives? Is it... The secretary has a lot of ideas.
Yeah, it's all of the above, Joe, and we've not been talking about root causes in healthcare. I've been in...
Yes, that was sarcasm, Mark, sorry.
...academic medicine and been at all the major institutions giving grand rounds. We don't talk about...
See, the problem with cane sugar is that if they use glyphosate to dry the cane sugar, then you have glyphosate in your sugar. And I'm not convinced that that's very well controlled. So the transition from one poison to another might just have different metabolic consequences. So that's one of the things that's on my mind. It's not the only thing. The other thing is that, you know, Mexican Coke isn't that good for you either. Granted, it might be better than drinking, you know, Coca-Cola with corn syrup in it, but I don't think liquid candy is liquid candy and liquid candy is liquid candy. That's what you got to think about. And fast food, I mean, you know, deep fried food is really tasty for a very particular reason. And the worst forms of it are very, very bad. But it's also about frequency, you know? I mean, if you never eat at In-N-Out Burger, if you never eat at McDonald's, if you never eat at Burger King, if you never eat at Arby's, you know, and then what? So, you know, changing all those foods to healthier things doesn't really affect you as an American, but it does affect a lot of poor people who spend a majority of their money in places where they're not, you know, optimizing their food. They don't have time to cook. They might be single. I mean, and so this is really kind of the, you know, I mean, if you have a family that works well, you have one of the parents is, you know, I mean, the next door neighbors, it's exactly the opposite of our house. The lady has a more, how would I say it, you know, important job that she, you know, is a little bit more hardcore about. And he's more relaxed about his job, and he does almost all the cooking. And every time I've had anything sent over, he's a remarkable cook, which I am not. I mean, I'm competent. I wouldn't die in the wilderness, you know, and I if I was in a sailboat with a basic kitchen, I could probably make breakfast. But let's not, I mean, people that don't have a family, ladies and gentlemen, live a very different life in America. Like my brother lives a very different life. They order out a lot. And it's just a remarkable place that we are in America right now, because when this all goes south, you know, and people who are eating out of boxes and bags can't get the boxes and bags anymore, it's going to be a very bizarre world. It's going to be a very bizarre time as we transition into a time when, if you were not taking responsibility and you were not setting yourself up, you know, for some success, you're going to be in big trouble when the water goes out. You're going to be in big trouble when the lights go out for a couple months. And I'm not joking around about it anymore. You don't need to tell me it's going to be a pole shift. You just need to tell me that these people are where they are right now, where somehow or another in America, we have this guy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Jayanta Bhattacharya at these very important integral positions within the Health and Human Services hierarchy. And the only explanation I have for it is that we are being undermined. It's some kind of Trojan horse where we were fooled. I was fooled. I was there. I got the free shirt in Boston. And I thought I was witnessing perhaps American history. You know, American history that was predicted in the 2008 Skyhorse book written by supposedly Jesse Ventura, where in the epilogue, Jesse Ventura is running for president and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running as an independent. And Jesse takes Bobby as his vice president, and then right after they're elected, Jesse gets shot. Isn't that incredibly odd epilogue to write in a book? Skyhorse Publishing, of course, being the publisher that now Children's Health Defense publishes their book under. Tony Lyons being the guy who helped with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign. Tony Lyons, the guy that Steve Bannon, whenever he mentions his name, calls him a genius. It's all one scripted show, ladies and gentlemen. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s dad played an integral role in the modernization of the FDA during the time of Estes Kefauver. And so did Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein's dad.
root causes. We don't ask, why do 40% of our nation's children now have a chronic disease? Why do a third of our nation's children now have prediabetes or diabetes? We've got to talk about school lunch programs, not just putting every 6-year-old on Ozempic. We've got to talk about environmental exposures and chemicals in the food, not just chemotherapy. If you look at the types of cancer that are going up in young people, they are the GI cancers. That is the organ that interfaces with what we eat. So
no, I had a couple high school kids when I was a teacher who already had irritable bowel syndrome. My guess is that they got the HPV vaccine as teenagers. I don't know, because at the time I was an idiot. But what I do know is that there was a couple girls. One was a senior and one was a junior at the same school where I was at. And it happened to be a school where the kids were closer to the teachers. I don't know why I can't say it. It's the Chicago Academy for the Arts. I taught there for a year, and it's a really wonderful school. It's a private school, so most of the kids are from decent, well-to-do families, although there are scholarships to be had. And at the time, I mean, it was just a magnificent place. You taught your academic in the morning, and then they had arts all afternoon, and some of them were dancers, some of them were theater students, some of them were graphic artists, visual arts, and then there were musicians, and they took it to an extreme. I mean, it was a very impressive level of student that place produced, and they were very interesting students to have in chemistry and physics. And because art students at that school got very close to each other, when I had this thing in the classroom that we would say if we're on the air, off the air, and if they said, can we talk off the air, then we could talk about stuff, and somebody started talking about that, and I didn't understand even at the time why they were asking me about it, but they were asking me, where do they think this is coming from? Because there's 2 girls in this class, or in our senior class, who have this really bad bowel thing, and we don't why did that happen, and do you know? And I didn't even know what the question meant. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What is that? And so I had to look it up. We had a little follow-up class about it, what I learned when I Googled it, when I looked it up on the internet, but I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't have the answer back then. I was an idiot. I was just treading water trying to get into med school. And so for me, this is a very long, painful awakening. As an American, it's a very long, painful awakening to understand that much of this, mythology is centered around America, is centered around the American experiment, because that's where, of course, where all the money was, all the power was, the big military, the endless resources. And so even the international players that were involved in this multi-generational plan still had to move through the circles in America. And in London and England and the Vatican, I guess. I don't know. But holy crap, ladies and gentlemen, we're there right now. You can see it. As Mark said, it's not that, we're not that far from being in Nazi Germany already. If you understand how these coordinated liars got where they are, which is just ruled by podcast, just agreeing to agree on something. I mean, these people, ladies and gentlemen, are playing a very dangerous game, because if we wake up and realize it and show it and see it, they won't be able to sustain it anymore. It's the sort of sitting there with your 3D glasses on, eating popcorn, and as long as you sit there with your glasses on and munching popcorn, all of these people are just going to keep on performing. But the moment that you take your glasses off and throw the popcorn at the screen, log off of social media, start building your own peer tube, start, using Mastodon to communicate with people and follow people on a federated network, and show them that you're willing not to use X anymore. You're willing not to use Facebook anymore. You're willing to just stop. And what would really be amazing is if people that paid for these websites would stop. I've never paid for Twitter, but I'm going to stop paying for Rumble very soon. I have to pay for the privilege to stream there. No more. It's not going to happen anymore. because there's no reason to. There's a open source app. You don't have to log in. I never have to charge. I can just shake the can on the internet and hope people feel the need to support the work. This guy is a fraud, and he's part of a greater fraud. America needs help. We need help from the rest of the world for them to understand what's happening, to understand the fraud that's behind Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump could be fooled by all these people he's surrounded by. He could have come into office thinking that everything was going to be great, and then suddenly got fooled into believing he was just shot at. So now he's a very different dude, but he doesn't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I just know for sure that a kid from my kid's high school didn't show up on a roof an hour away from here with the sniper skills to pierce Donald Trump's ear with an imperceptibly small scar. It just didn't happen.
We've got to look at all the chemicals. We are doing an inventory of the 1,000+ chemicals banned in Europe that appear in the U.S. food supply. You saw our action to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply by next year. We're getting tremendous participation by the food manufacturers. We are looking into baby formula innovation, that recipe the FDA issues.
Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that I think they got the HPV vaccine and that's why those girls have irritable bowel. Irritable bowel, could have a lot of different issues. Inflammation down there means that somehow you're autoimmune. I don't know. I haven't gone into it deep enough. And certainly, eating bad chemicals, and then having inflammation down there would make sort of broad biological sense, right? So I'm totally down with that.
Hasn't been updated essentially in 30 years. We need more innovation. Moms want baby formula without added sugar, without corn syrup, without seed oils. We need more innovation. It's been a regulatory failure. And we're asking the big question, why does it take 10 years for a drug to come to market? I mean, that is a giant existential question, and we're going to have to challenge deeply held assumptions to answer it. So we announced our program to reduce animal testing and replace it with computational modeling and organ-on-a-chip technology, whereby drugs can be tested on cell culture medium in a lab with cells from the liver or heart or other organoids.
And so we talked about this before, and we might have even covered this stupid video. It's so hard for me to keep track of what I've done and what I have yet to do. But it's really scary to think that everything about the FDA is being changed right under our nose, under the pretense that it was in the way at the beginning of the pandemic. It caused problems. There's no excuse for something taking 10 years to come to market. These things are all scripted from the very beginning, when Kevin McKernan was on podcast after podcast saying the FDA is in the way, that the 10-page form for the EUA is just ridiculous. He actually said that.
We have a priority pathway now to pilot. Can we get a decision out in weeks instead of a year once that final application is approved? Can we run more continuous trials? And can we use AI more in the...
So a continuous trial is where they, post-market monitoring. This is really just human testing. It's, we don't know, so we're just going to roll it out. It didn't kill the liver cells, so we're just going to send it out. That's actually what he's talking about doing and what they're shifting to.
The review process, we now have AI agency-wide for our reviewers. And yesterday we announced we're going to make our decision letters, including rejection letters for drug, public information so companies don't spin the results and developers can see exactly how the FDA thinks. And that's part of our radical transparency agenda.
I wanted to talk to you, Dr. McCary, about the national priority vouchers, which does aim to speed up the approval process after a final drug application is submitted, to get it down to 1 to 2 months as opposed to 10 to 12 months for national priorities. What qualifies as a national priority? I mean, let's say there's an obesity drug that's even better than the ones out on the market. Is that a national?
There's nothing to stop them from appointing Robert Malone in after the midterms. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to stop them. Maybe Marty wants to go work in the private sector. I mean, they changed FDA directors from the dude with the grease back hair from You know, like, wasn't it Janet Woodcock, and then they changed it to Gottlieb? I mean, I don't know. There's no reason why they can't.
National priority for the FDA to consider an expedited process. What falls into the category?
Great question, Melissa. So it's a large unmet public health need. It is a priority identified as part of a U.S. domestic national priority, like the domestication of manufacturing as a national security issue. And look, the president is very adamant that he would like to see lower drug prices for Americans, and he doesn't like it that Americans are getting ripped off with.
There's an obesity drug that's even better than the ones out on the market. Is that a national priority for the FDA to consider an expedited process? What falls into the category?
Great question, Melissa. So it's a large unmet public health need. It is a priority identified as part of a U.S. domestic national priority, like the domestication of manufacturing as a national security issue.
The domestication of manufacturing, I think he is referring to bringing pharmaceutical manufacturing back to the United States. It's a lot of words he's throwing at one time.
And look, the president is very adamant that he would like to see lower drug prices for Americans, and he doesn't like it that Americans are getting ripped off with drugs that are 2, 5, 10 times higher in the United States than in London or France or Germany, other OECD countries. So we are including the affordability of drugs as a national priority. So we have a committee that's set up that will determine which products and companies will get these vouchers as a part of a pilot. Look, we got to try new things. We've got to ask ourselves, why does it take so long for a cure to come to market? And we want to see more cures and meaningful treatments for Americans. We want to see big data used so we can have eyes on a drug immediately after approval and not just wake up 5 years later and say, hey, Vioxx may have killed 38,000 people. Maybe we need to take action. Or
wow, Vioxx. I wonder who was a whistleblower for Vioxx. I think her name was Brandy Vaughn. What an interesting thing to drop there. Wow, that's pretty crazy. What a shithead.
Opioids may have killed nearly 1 million Americans 19 years after the approval of OxyContin. We're going to be having an incredible post-market surveillance.
And 1 million over what time frame? Post-market surveillance of what? Wow, what a shithead.
It's a program where we monitor drugs immediately after approval using big data and the cloud. And if we
He keeps repeating big data. Now he said the cloud. This is all the same show. It's exciting. Just like Claire Craig said from the very beginning on the top of her Twitter thing, she's, all for AI, all for AI and cures and stuff. AI and genetics.
Do it well, it can actually change the threshold for approval, especially when it comes to rare diseases.
Can you give us an example of a health crisis right now, just so we have an idea of what sorts of drugs, what sorts of companies may be seeking to use this national priority voucher program?
One of the cool things, Melissa, in this job is you get to see potentially promising treatments that are in the pipeline. And I'd like to see a cure for type 1 diabetes. I'd like to see more cancer therapies that apply to stage 4 metastatic disease and cancer therapies that result in what we call...
So again, you can hear that he's positioned very well, right? His career as a cancer talker and Vinay's career as a cancer talker will allow them to sit opposite each other and talk about these priorities with great detail and bamboozle most of the people who listen. And he's done it a number of times on the podcast with Vinayak and that other Indian that sits between them. And he's doing it here, repeatedly going back to the well of cancer because that's his wheelhouse, right? That's where he knows all the buzzwords and he knows all the little trinkets and sparkly things that he can say to make it seem like he knows what he's talking about, just like he did in the beginning with the, it's all a really amazing script. He's pretty talented.
Medicine, a complete pathologic response, that is, the cancer melts away. There already appears to be some therapies that may enable cancers to go shrink and go away completely. That is, be eliminated without chemo, surgery, or radiation therapy. I'd like to see a universal flu shot so we don't have to try to guess each.
He'd like to see a universal flu shot. As a surgeon for cancer, he just kind of pulls that out of the air, you know, something that everybody's wanted for a really long time, even all the way back to Hazeltine. What in the hell's going on here other than a scripted traitor? But he can't really be a traitor because he's not really an American. You see, that's the beauty of it.
Strain is coming. There are candidates out there, and I'd like to see treatments for neurodegenerative diseases and other disabling diseases. I had an aunt who died of all.
You'd like to see treatments. He would like to see things come to market that we could post-market monitor. He wants to see treatments, not cures. He didn't say cures there. He said cures before, but he said treatments now, because right when you bring them to market and then monitor them in the people that you're testing them in, they're just treatments. And then if they could become cures. You see, it's all an enchantment. It's all a semantic enchantment to get you to believe that he's not completely undermining everything that the FDA was supposed to stand for. And instead, he's modernizing it. Instead of going back and doing the job that the FDA should have done better in the beginning of the pandemic with regulating all of the new medical devices that are now on the market, he's just going to ignore that and try to rush forward into the future and approve more things.
Alzheimer's disease, I'd like to see more in the neurodegenerative space.
A lot of angst and panic about layoffs at the FDA. I don't. Can you? Was it bloated? Did it need restructuring? Is 15% a big number?
What's going on here? Something's red. Oh, that's fine.
In
That's
terms
good.
of layoffs, doctor, because there are some people that say it's going to safeguarding the drugs that come into this country, manufactured elsewhere, are at risk now. There's not enough people to monitor. What do you make of that criticism?
That's not true. So there were no layoffs to scientific reviewers or inspectors or our law enforcement division at the FDA. We do inspections around the world, and we're leveling the playing field on that front. But there were early retirement.
Did you know that the FDA inspects the places around the world that make the precursor drugs that we use? It's a crazy organization that if a lot of people retired from it unexpectedly or unpredictably, they could be in an awful lot of trouble. And this clown and Vinayak Prasad are not in a professional position to do anything. They don't have a network of people they can recruit from or something like that. These people are truly placed, scripted frauds.
And so we're actively hiring scientific reviewers. Normally there's a vacancy rate because there's a turnover in scientific reviewers, but no scientific reviewers were laid off. There were tremendous redundancies in the empire building culture.
Oh, so there was a lot of redundancies. And so, we didn't lose too many people. We had a lot of people we didn't need.
The fiefdoms of the centers at the FDA, and they became their own, independent organizations, and they had very little accountability. They had their own revenue stream from user fees, and they had redundant services as a result. That is, we had 12 different travel offices. We had nearly 2,000 HR people and budget and procurement staff. And a lot of it was just because of the center fiefdom culture. So we've consolidated that now to say, if we're going to launch AI for the FDA reviewers, as we recently did, we're going to do it agency-wide. It's not going to be each center independently with their own IT teams coming up with a product. Just look at our adverse event reporting.
It's remarkable that he has just said it over and over and over again on this podcast and others, that they are just going to use AI to review things. It's crazy.
Systems. They are so clunky, Joe. We have one for vaccines called VAERS, one for devices called MAUD. We have VAERS and CARES and FAIRS and Sentinel. We have 10 different adverse event reporting systems, all sort of independently developed. We're going to go to one, and so that way we can have a great user interface and a great database of adverse events that we can use for our post-market surveillance of drugs.
Doctor, I also wanted to ask you about your quest to make the FDA more transparent, and part of that was yesterday releasing more than 200 rejection letters, as you had mentioned before, to the public, so the public can actually see why a drug was rejected, as opposed to getting a press release from the company, which may or may not give the full details or may have spin involved, et cetera. The letters were from 2020 to 2024, and investors at least are wondering if it's going to be more real time, because that's the only way it's really going to be useful.
Yeah, let me be clear.
Investors are worried that these letters are going to be released in a not a very timely manner. So sometimes they might I might be able to act on it as an investor, and sometimes they might be too late.
Here, Melissa, it's going to be real time. That was just the initial batch because we need time to do the human redaction of those letters. So I know some media outlets were, hours after our announcement saying, oh, some of the, this is only part of the stack of all the letters. We have thousands of letters that we are redacting. We're going to make them public. Drug developers and inventors are going to be able to go through them and see not just how the FDA thinks, but how one study section of the FDA thinks, the study section of interest. And we're going to be releasing them in real time as we make decisions. And that way shareholders will be able to see exactly what the FDA said. Look, markets like predictability. And I've been doing a CEO listening tour. We're about 2/3 the way through. It's in 7 cities. And when we meet with pharmaceutical CEOs in private, that is where they can be open and honest about their ideas for reforming the FDA without their shareholders listening, they tell us they want more predictability. They want to know exactly how the FDA thinks, and they want better communication so they can, once...
I really want to say who gives an, right now. I really want to yell it because he has said for months that he is concerned with what CEOs want from the FDA. He has repeatedly said that the FDA is in the way. It is a relic. It is in need of modernization, which is code for need of removal. Effectively, this is the destruction of the FDA.
CEO said if we could just have a couple 15-minute calls with the FDA review team along the process, it could save us nearly a year of doing things just out of guesswork and trying to figure out what the FDA wants. So we're going to be radically transparent.
When can you come back?
I love your show. I'd like to see fewer direct-to-consumer drug ads on your show, but I love your show.
I was just going to ask you about
and
that.
I'll come back.
I was going to say I want to talk to you about that because I still want this purple pill that's on nightly news every night. I don't know what it does. I have no idea, but they make me want it so much. I've been bugging my doctor. Give me that purple pill. It's crazy, doctor. Why do we need? If you need something, does the doctor need to be sold on something on TV? For him to prescribe or her to prescribe the right thing for you? What's the whole rationale behind all these things? All I know about are side effects I never want to get all over my body. That's all I know from these things. And I see people, overweight people marching along the street. Where are they going? What are all these things and why do we need them?
Yeah, they're always singing and dancing. They're always singing and dancing. And we have a regulation at the FDA. And I know sometimes you're at home totally healthy. You just get back from the gym and you're watching these ads nonstop and you want to say, okay, I give up. I'll take it. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is. But I don't want it.
Look, there's a regulation that says there should not be a misleading impression from these ads. And so we're taking a hard look at that.
Sometimes it makes me very sad.
Your attention, please. Your attention, please. I have an announcement to make. I'm bored. Ha ha!
You think you're bored? What about all those poor suckers out there in the audience?
Ah, yeah. They just keep praying that their category is next. Well, as long as they are praying and while we're at it,
I get to anoint their feet. You keep your hands off me, you little twink, or I'll call the cops.
My daddy's a cop. His breath smells like cat food. And that, my friends, is how I make a living.
And holy shit, my friends, this is how I make a living. I can't believe it, but it's true. Gigaohm Biological, your consciousness is prime real estate. These people are playing for. No one has gotten this far. No one has gotten this far. Do you hear me? No one has gotten this far. This is a picture with me and with Suzanne Humphreys and Paul Thomas and James Lyons Weiler and Polly Tommy and Mary Holland and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Brian Hooker. No one has gotten this far, ladies and gentlemen. No one. That is live. He's in the garage. Think about this for a second. Watch these words. Watch these words. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the protocols were manslaughter. Gain of function is a mythology, and the Scooby-Doo mystery that they fooled us into solving is definitely real, and the spectacular commitment to lies is what sustains it. You can see through it if you understand that supplementary oxygen causes ARDS. Virology is just synthetic DNA and RNA transfected into cell culture in animals. Placebo batches would have been the easiest way for the signal from transfection not to be noticed. And, of course, intramuscular injection is a very dumb idea from the late 1800s. They've sustained this, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie.
Robert Malone,
I don't think I'm a liar.
Jay
I try not to
Bhattacharya,
be a liar. I don't want to be a liar.
Brian Hooker, Kevin McKernan, Nick Hudson, Jessica Rose, Mike Eden. They're all on the same script.
You know, you can sort of feel it in people.
Big Mike doesn't want anything to do with these people. He's still medium Mike, I would say. I tease him quite regularly that he better go to sleep and get growing because he's not as big as I want him to be. I don't think he's going to reach 215 pounds, which is what I wanted him to be. But he will be a big little boy. He's a good little boy. That's the important thing. I got to train him not to bite. He is a Great Pyrenee that bites a lot more than I think a lot of Great Pyrenees bite. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe they bite. He's got a good prey instinct. He's a killer. So when he's hungry, he smiles at you and chomps his teeth. He's hilarious. He also, biting stops after 1 year. Thank goodness. Because right now he bites me in my face when he's hungry. And it's very loving and very hilarious. But as his head gets bigger, the joke is less funny. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't, I do bite him back. If you don't understand why the cheese is free on social media, if you don't understand why buying a red hat or a blue hat, it don't matter, you really are not there yet. And you've got to learn because you've got to teach your kids. We must teach our kids. That's the trick. If we don't teach our kids, this is all over. You want to leave a voicemail like I played at the beginning of the stream, please call 412-423-6343. Leave a voicemail. I'll play it. Thank you for being here. This is Gigaohm Biological coming to you live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A friend of mine, Mark Kulak, comes to you live from Boston, Massachusetts. Housatonic Live is found at HousatonicITS.com. Great website, lots of resource there. Nothing like that do I offer. Quite frankly, he is a very humbling operation. This Substack is great. It's about the murder in Scotland. Lots of testimonial in video form there, worth checking out. And the artistry of Ned at Ned Amphion, Substack.com. Sorry for butchering that, Ned. Great guy, great artist. He may help me with a book. I'm not really sure how possible that is, although he's got so much already done. I can certainly feature some of it in the book to come. I'm very, very excited to share some more truth with you, at least as far as I've found it. If you would like I can also put some early COVID survivor stickers in there too. Just send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Dr. J at P.O. Box 802, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, 15102, and we'll get you some swag. I do not have any hats. There's a lot of people asking for hats. I don't have hats. I will, but that's quite a commitment financially, and right now we're kind of in the hole. And I'm trying to stay focused on the biology, because if I don't stay focused on the biology, I start I start swearing a lot. If I don't stay focused on the biology, I'm lost. If I don't stay focused on the biology, instead I pay attention to clowns on Rumble or on other podcasts, I gotta stay focused like this bird is focused. America needs to be focused on this biology. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been here for a while, you're here at the top of the wave, and if not, you might be a skilled TV watcher, a skilled social media user who needs reminding on how to stay focused on the biology, maybe needs to be shown how not to take the bait on social media, maybe needs to be reminded of who their neighbors are. That's what Gigaohm Biological is trying to do. Folks could sew that Velcro thing on the hat. That's true, they could. I don't think it would look very good, but they could. Yes, they definitely could. Catherine always thinking. Catherine, I got a big box of stuff from a beehive. In case that was something you are not aware of yet, I'm very happy. Yes, please take me up on that. Send the freaking envelope, please.
Of course. As I've been trying to say for 4 years now, there is no pandemic. There was no pandemic, and there will be no pandemic. And it's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And
if it's clear...
we shouldn't waste time talking about it.
So it's remarkable, right? I think that basically he was told that that's what he needed to tell me. At the time, I still really wasn't able to hammer home the intramuscular injections, just a dumb idea from the 1800s, but I was close. And so, I don't know what to tell you anymore. Am I pessimistic? Not so much as I used to be. And the reason why is because my pessimism was derived from the idea that I wouldn't be able to change the minds of any of these people. Now that I've accepted the fact that I'm not going to be able to change the minds of any of these people, and that actually a significant portion of their followings will never be open to the possibilities that I'm offering, I realize that there's this whole other part of the country, whole other part of the earth that has no idea who these performing dipshitters are because they've never clicked the right buttons. They've never clicked on the right links. And so these people are probably very open to the idea that America has been bamboozled by a whole crew of idiots that might have been fielded by a team of advisors that might include some of these people. They might be very open to that. Some place like the Netherlands might be very interested to see how many podcasts did Robert Malone, the farmer and homesteader, do just with Dutch influential podcasters. I can find at least 5. That's pretty remarkable. It's not the only country on earth. He can't speak Dutch. Ik kan wel een beetje Nederlands praten, maar niemand is mij aan het bellen. Ik snap dat ook niet. Maar dat is de waarheid. Nu, echt, nu. Je hebt een Amerikaans man met een allochtoner buitenkant. We kunnen heel goed Nederlands praten voor iemand die niet daar woont. En niemand in Nederland is curieus over wie is dit man. Hij zit in dit boek. Hij zit in de eerste pagina van het boek van Robert F. Kennedy Jr. En ze hebben niet gevraagd. Wat is aan de hand in Amerika, joh? Niemand is gevraagd. And that is because this is a joke. Okay? That's why this is happening, because where's my mousy mouse? Down, over. This is a joke, right? It's unacceptable.
Condition that we will not call autism. I don't like the word autism. He was vaccine damaged.
It is unacceptable at this stage for us to be the only stream that can explain, the only source of information on the internet that says that autism spectrum disorder is a myth used to make sure that intramuscular injections never questioned, that virology is never questioned, that public health is never questioned. It is absolutely impossible for this not to be a national, if not global news story, that somebody who is employed by that current Health and Human Services Secretary as a scientific advisor for more than a year is now going public to say that that guy and Jay Bhattacharya and probably Marty Makary are all scripted frauds that don't belong where they are. They are scripted frauds, just like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is, and I believed in him. And I can explain how I was played. I can drop names on how I was played, and I'm not proud of it. I'm ashamed of it. Because I lost my father-in-law, I lost my sister-in-law, I lost a girlfriend from my youth, and I lost my best friend from college, like the guy that I most looked up to on this earth as a fellow human. All to this shit. And it's all because I fell for this. And all the people that came to my house and texted my wife and put me on Signal and Telegram and whatever, they're all responsible for this in my mind. They all deserve a knuckle sandwich from me. They all deserve to have the inside of their knee kicked to the side while they have all their weight on that leg. That's how I feel. And I don't know what to do about that sometime other than to explain to people that that should be a clue to you how serious this is. Because I'm not afraid to say it. You know, if you go online and you say that people are bad when they're not bad, that's not good. If you go online and say things people did that they didn't do, that's not good. But I'm not doing that. And more importantly, these people that I'm talking about know that I'm not doing that. This is for all the marbles, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not screwing around. I'm trying to plant trees under whose shade I will never shelter. I'm trying to plant the seed of knowledge that our children and our grandchildren will use to shed the shackles of these assholes. And I think the truth is right here in front of you. Intramuscular injection as medicine is a dumb idea from the late 1800s, and that's it. The rest is lemmings. The rest is assumptions. The rest is yeah buts. Autism spectrum disorder is an illusion. Pandemics and gain of function are mythologies. And the autism spectrum disorder thing is very, very simple. The more symptomologies that you include, the more developmental trajectories that you include, the more varied groups of symptoms that you include in autism spectrum disorder, the less likely it is that somebody like 2013 Brian Hooker will be able to make any progress with regard to, my son doesn't have autism, I don't like the word autism, my son was vaccine injured, he was neurologically damaged by injection. And the way to cure that problem is to make all these other people with legitimate, I don't know what you call them, disease, disorders, sicknesses, conditions, all think that they fall under this spectrum. That's the illusion that James Lyons Weiler, that Brian Hooker, that Mary Holland, that Polly Tommy, that Andrew Wakefield, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have been conscripted to sustain. Is it the MMR? Is it DDP? Is it multiple? Is it during an ear infection? Is it the Tylenol afterward? This is not a scramble for the truth. This is a malevolent obfuscation of it, because the truth is very simple. And there is no one else on earth, no one else on the internet who is saying it. That's got to be something worth sharing. It's got to be something where you're like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to email this to everyone. Just like you heard that guy say in the voicemail at the beginning of the show. At some point, this has to move you enough to take drastic action, because it's as simple as this. You don't need to go any farther. This should be enough to spur people to do their own work. Anybody that's already at the threshold of accepting that something isn't right is capable of processing this screen. So why would there be a health freedom movement that's fake in America? The answer is on the slide with Polly Tommy. It's worth millions of votes. The answer is in the war room of Steve Bannon. It's worth millions of votes. The answer is on Rumble. It's worth millions in sales of ivermectin, millions in sales of nonsense. That's why there's a fake health freedom movement in America, but all that's a disguise. Those people are the easy witting and unwitting participants because they're poor, because they like attention. They imagine they're taking advantage of their good looks, whatever, I don't know. Moving up the ladder, maybe they'll be on nightly news, or they'll get to have a podcast like Joe Rogan someday. You know, that's the illusion that Joe Rogan has cast on everybody, that if you're really good and you really get enough listeners, you can get a $100 million contract from Spotify.
Stop lying!
So why do we have it? I think we have a fake health freedom movement in America that goes all the way back to recruiting somebody like Brian Hooker to say it right and to build a big top tent of health freedom. The reason why we have a fake health freedom movement is because intramuscular injection is a dumb idea from the late 1800s. Because autism spectrum disorder is a mythology that needs a fake health freedom movement to sustain. Because pandemics and gain of function are mythologies that need a fake health freedom movement to sustain. That's why we have it. And if you want to learn about it, you want to investigate it, you got to go back to 2013 when Brian didn't say autism, didn't like the word. You got to go back to 2015 when Mary Holland and Paul Offit were opposite each other on Democracy Now! You got to go back to 2016 when the Vaxxed movie was produced by these foreign traders, where they recruited and really seemed to absorb Brian Hooker, establish Mary Holland, establish Polly Tommy and Andrew Wakefield here, and this false narrative about the MMR not being tested. Then you got to look at 17, 18, and 19, because that's where all these health freedom people were going bananas. And Brandy Vaughn and Tony Bark were meeting each other and starting to build their own network, starting to put up billboards around the United States that said there is no safe vaccine. And then you got to go back to 2020, after all the times that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Judy Mikovits and all these posers were on stage with those two, that they were both killed in 2020. You got to go all the way back then, because I think that's what this is. How do you make a health freedom movement is very simple. You put a bunch of these shitheads on stage with Tony Bark and Brandy Vaughn and get them to say all the things that Tony Bark and Brandy Vaughn are saying right up until the beginning of the pandemic, and then stop right at the end. And now make it about freedom and make it about mandates. And then we'll be here with Judy Mikovits, Paul Thomas, Brian Hooker, Mary Holland, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., etc. That's how it works. That's how it happened. You can't change their script. I thought I could. I really did. That's the reason why I was so angry for so long. Now that I've accepted that I can't change their script, the anger is subsiding. The frustration is subsiding.
More comfortable sharing their personal experiences with mental health, a sign that the stigma surrounding it is diminishing. On Instagram and TikTok combined, there are nearly 90 million posts with the hashtag mental health. And terms like gaslighting, trauma, and toxic relationships are now part of everyday conversation. But not all the information online is accurate. Stephanie Tsai spoke with Taisha Caldwell Harvey, a psychologist and founder of the private practice, The Black Girl Doctor.
Taisha, how do you see social media contributing to misinformation about mental health?
Yes, there's so much.
Now, what's being portrayed here is extremely malevolent because essentially social media is useful. Social media is beneficial to society, but there's also these niggly problems of misinformation and people making a living selling things that have no base, kind of like an unregulated space, where people are selling medical and food stuff. Anyway.
Saying really anybody right now can say anything that they want to on the internet and about any topic.
So are we going to have the FDA regulate that? The speech on the internet? Because right now the FDA does regulate, or supposed to regulate, the labels. Safe and effective. Maybe they'll also regulate the safe and effective claims on these. Maybe they'll get people to advocate for that. Do you see where this is going? This is the other side of the coin, of course. This is PBS NewsHour, the most terrifying propaganda network on earth.
And while in a way that can be really good, it also means that, the rate at which something spreads like wildfire has nothing to do with how accurate the information is. And right now we're seeing so many.
That's for sure, because the accuracy of Houstonic ITS and Gigaohm Biological would have necessarily dictated that everyone on Earth would own a hat by now.
Creators and people just sharing their experiences online, but equating their experience to a reality for others and to fact. And it's just not really true.
To what extent do you think social media, the misinformation, the self-diagnoses leads to people sort of pathologizing what might be considered more normal emotions and stress responses that we all have? And what are the potential risks of doing that?
Yeah, I think one of the huge dangers really is invalidating or downplaying mental illness by equating it to symptoms of a diagnosis. And so we can all experience anxiety, we can all experience sadness, periods of high distractibility, but that doesn't mean that you have an anxiety disorder. It doesn't mean that you have depression. It doesn't mean that you're neurodivergent. And
Neurodivergent is also something that's now, it overlaps with the autism spectrum disorder. It's wow.
Doesn't mean that you have PTSD. And
Don't forget, we watched a video a couple weeks ago of a girl who said that she basically decided to diagnose herself as autistic because of a TikTok video. It's an illusion, ladies and gentlemen. It's an enchantment. They want you to believe that the internet is this powerful. They want you to believe that the internet is this dangerous so that it can be regulated. And more importantly, that they can regulate it by requiring you to use ID to use it, because then they can track the misinformation to you. This is both sides of the coin here. The trap is that.
Language in that way can be extremely harmful to someone who has these diagnoses because it can make them question themselves, and it also can make society more critical and less supportive.
What do you think is driving this? And in some ways, is having an ADHD or an autism self-diagnosis becoming sort of a form of identity?
I think people look for community, right? When you're experiencing something and you want to give it language, social media can be a great place to search that term or to search an experience.
This is not speaking normally. This is very trained language, and it's an enchantment. I want to go back just a few seconds to hear exactly how she said it.
Finding other people, and you know that you're not alone, which is language. Social media can be a great place to be. I think people look for community, right? When you're experiencing something and you want to give it language.
See, people look for community, and when you're experiencing something, you want to give it language. Now, when I was a kid, I would use language that I got from books that I read, language that I got from the newspaper or from magazines that I read or from people I talked to. You see the danger that they are defaulting to the idea that this is just the new form of a library. This is a new form of an information source. We just have to teach people to use it better. This is remarkable because that means that, misuse of language on the internet could potentially, I mean, how do you use a medium like that? That doesn't even make any sense. It's almost like telling somebody how, if you just look at the right porn and look at the right, videos, then you can make your sex life better. It's just, you got to know which ones are the right videos, I guess. Holy shit.
Social media can be a great place to search that term or to search an experience and just start finding other people, and that you're not alone, which is really powerful and oftentimes can be the first step.
So it's weird, right? She can't possibly, and PBS NewsHour can't possibly imagine how this might be weaponized by a military-industrial complex that wanted to permanently rule its population using social media-based myths. Their imagination is so shallow that they can only see this one layer of misinformation, which is just bad people being bad people. They can't imagine a coordinated layer of state actors and private actors vying for control of a populace. They can't imagine that social media would ever make that possible. This is just crazy, right?
Step that people take before they get help. And that's one of the reasons why I love that more people are talking about this. Psychologists for years have been trying to get people to get help instead of sit and suffer.
My son was encouraged at the end of his freshman year to use ChatGPT to build a slide deck for a presentation. I shit you not. I don't even know what to do in a scenario like that.
And so now there's this cultural shift with younger millennials, Gen Z, I feel like is leading the charge. And people are hungry for language to express themselves. They want to talk about how they're feeling, and they want to rid themselves of the shame and stigma, and want to just live out loud and be like, I can have a full human experience. And I think that part is extremely, extremely beautiful.
I think that part is extreme bullshit. What she just said there is the most malevolent, nasty talk I've ever heard. A lot of it is bullshit, but a lot of it is designed to sound very warm and comforting to, Gen Z leading the way.
Stop lying!
Oh my gosh, it's gross.
And yet it seems maybe to be an overcorrection is what you're saying. So what would you say, what advice would you give to sort of rein this back into a place where one can identify when they need to see a real therapist?
Yeah. Well, one, never self-diagnose on TikTok. And I think definitely when you have a cultural shift, you often get this pendulum swing, right? And I think we have kind of swung really far one direction, and I'm hoping we will settle back out somewhere in the middle. We know from research that 50% of all adults will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. And so if you're going to have people online talking about their whole life bold and loud, then we're going to have content around how we navigate our mental health and how we deal with mental illness. And so I don't think it's wrong, but I think we really need to separate what is I'm sharing my experience and somebody receiving it that way versus your experience as an individual person is so important that it deserves to be the center point of what this symptom is, right? And I think for people really needing to be careful of what you absorb, and in terms of who you take advice from. Think about it like you would your physical health. Would you take advice and start taking medication from somebody on TikTok that had no qualifications?
Maybe not somebody, but a couple people. Maybe if 3 people sat around a table and 2 of them were doctors, then I might take their consensus advice. That's what Rule by Podcast is, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly what it is. It's a very easy message to say don't trust clowns on TikTok. What's not a very easy message to say, because they're not saying it at all, is don't take advice from podcasts where 3 people sit around and talk about shit. Where the soon-to-be NIH director sits around with a non-working former professor of his former university and talks about shit. Don't listen to that. That's the reality.
Prescribe medication.
So everybody's got a timeline. My timeline is very different than Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s. It involves my former bosses in Norway winning the Nobel Prize in 2014. It involves the birth of my 3rd kid in 2018. It involves my family moving from the Netherlands to America. And it involves a series of, interferences with my work and my ability to make a living that went from, and I can just do it off the top of my head with this arrow, drastic to Piper Stover, to the Signal group with Brett Weinstein, to the group of people with Matt Crawford and Panda, to the group of people with Matt Crawford and the Steve Kerr Steering Committee, to the group of people at Panda with Jonathan Engler and Jessica Hockett and Nick Hudson. And up here, you have my employment at Pitt. And as a neuroscientist, then you have my employment at Pitt, where I could just stay at home because they had to pay my salary out. And so that's why I started this podcast in the first place, basically. But first I was working for my brother. And this is actually the place where my brother and my parents stopped talking to me. And then at the end of 2021, this is when Kevin McKernan was first on my stream. And then soon after would be Jessica Rose. And then soon after, we have Charles Rixey showing up at my house to get me back into drastic and accept diffuse as real. Then I got a phone call right after the murder was over from two people on the same day, Senator Ron Johnson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying they wanted me to help them. Then I got hired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the red line. Then I got hired by CHD, the white line. Then I got fired at the end of 2023, the beginning of 2024, by Mary Holland and Brian Hooker for talking about Robert Malone, who Jay Bhattacharya would ask me in 2023 not to talk about, 2024 not to talk about, because he was going to be NIH director soon. Everybody's got a timeline, ladies and gentlemen. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s timeline is that of a traitor, a scripted one. The timeline of Robert Malone's is a long time scripted traitor. The timeline of Brian Hooker reveals somebody who could say it correctly in 2013 and then was recruited. The timeline of Brandy Vaughn and Tony Bark ends abruptly in 2020 with death. The timeline of all of
but
these
you can
people,
tell if someone's lying.
The timeline of all of these organizations ends in traitors, ends in scripted frauds. And I'm talking about all of them. They were all put in place from the very beginning to make sure that we would blame the novel virus for all the effects of transfection. We would get confused with this spike protein and all of its novel inserts. And they keep this. They are maintaining this illusion of consensus. Even inside of the Trump administration, there are all of these people that are maintaining this illusion of consensus about a novel virus. Millions of people were killed by, not by opioids, but by a virus. That's what changed the life expectancy in America. And that's illusion of consensus about that is sustained by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., by Jessica Rose, by Kevin McKernan, and by Jay Bhattacharya, all of whom don't seem to be able to do that simple math at all. It is a provided script. That's why this fake international fraud named Mike Yeadon has been on my show twice, but still doesn't really seem to get it. Still calls me JJ and is going out of his way, even spelling her name, to promote the Substack of Sasha Latipova. That's why you can see the script on X so easily. How many of these people are on X? Because it's a fraud. It's a script. And the script is taking place on specifically Substack and X to make these platforms owned by these assholes globally relevant. That's what Robert Malone's job really is. That's what CHD's job really is. That's what they're ultimately using all of this fake health freedom movement for. This fake conservative populist movement that Steve Bannon is part of. That's all to create the illusion that there is a populist movement that exists outside of national borders, that exists freely on the internet and is composed of all these international people, including a former employee of the CDC from Poland who actively, talked about Kaprowski until I said something and then immediately went nuts and now supposedly is being blocked by Kevin McKernan. But that's all an illusion. That's why they had months and months of arguing and calling each other names, and Nick Hudson got involved, and Sasha Latipova got involved, and there were all kinds of gifts. And then later on, JikiLeaks got involved, and we tried, but it didn't matter because it's a show. They don't even see our posts. Nick Hudson interacting with all of them. It's all an illusion. That's the reason why in 2020, he said, worst case scenario. In 2024, he said worst case scenario. And in between there, he spent 3 years streaming about me. And that's why in 2025, they're finally blowing the lid off SIDS. That's why in 2025, Kevin McCairn is being streamed a couple times on Steve Kirsch's VRSF Vaccine Safety Research Foundation to talk about the spike-induced brain injury and why all of them have decided, from Mary Holland to Mike Eden to Kevin McCairn to Peter Bregan and Ginger Bregan to Jane Ruby, to all promote the ever insightful Sasha Latipova. Don't forget that she was on my stream as one of the first performances she ever did in this narrative about batches. And when she was on my stream, she actually didn't do her presentation. She just let me play it. That's how you know that she was a scripted fraud. She didn't even want to give her presentation again because she wasn't confident that she could do it as well as she had in the recording. No one has ever gotten this far to tell you that Laura Bono is probably an innocent, unwitting participant. That the whole time at CHD, she probably understood that Mary really wasn't helping, but she didn't understand that Mary was a traitor to American kids. But Laura Bono could learn it now. Laura Bono could see the truth of this stream and then start to speak out and contact, I don't know, any news organization and say, hey, I'm one of the original founders of CHD, and I think Jonathan Couey's right. I think these people were frauds all along. That's why we never scored the touchdown. I could never figure it out, but now I think I figured it out. Jay's right. Jackie Hines was kind of my supervisor the whole time while I worked on the book. Jackie Haynes also knows that I'm 100% right here, and if she wanted to, she could go to a news outlet. I don't know what she's doing now, but any of these people that I haven't circled in this thing could probably figure out that they work for a shithole, a real sabotage organization that could have scored the touchdown already many years ago. Like the lady at the top of this picture over here, Suzanne Humphreys, could have scored the touchdown of, there's no safe vaccine. I don't think it's possible because it's antithetical to our biology. She could have said that on Joe Rogan just a few months ago, but she didn't. She said it while Brandy Vaughn and Tony Bark were still alive, and she said it on stage with them. And the same basically can be said for a lot of these people. I don't know why the only brown person that's international is Indian. The international head of CHD World is an Indian woman, or CHD Africa, or whatever the hell she does. It's crazy, ladies and gentlemen. No one's gotten this far. No one's gotten so far as to be able to say this with selfies with both of these guys. No one's gotten this far to tell you that, look, Jay Bhattacharya pulled me aside and told me he was going to be NIH director and told me not to talk about Robert Malone anymore before the election. Is that not a news story? Is that not important because CHD is selling the third book of Robert Malone now? Is that not important because they said they were fighting for children's health when in fact they weren't? Is it not important that at the head of HHS there is a fraud right now? Is it not important? I don't know. I don't know. I guess it's not. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to share, and don't forget to download the PeerTube app and let me know if you have any trouble getting it to work. It works so well for me. Be well. See you tomorrow.